Hello and welcome back to this podcast. Right at the beginning of his preface, Muqaddimah, Ibn al-Muqaffa explains what the Kalila Wa Dimna is about. The book, he says, is composed of exemplar and stories set down by learned men, ulama, from India, in which they sought to include the most eloquent statements they could find to communicate their wisdom. Learned men of every faith min kulli millah, and language strove ceaselessly to impart their knowledge, and they desired to express it in such a way that the various stratagems, hiyal, they constructed to convey it, composed in the most eloquent and perfect language, would be placed on the tongues of animals and birds. He also adds that the book combines wisdom and entertainment, and that the wise hukama will choose the wisdom and fools sukhafa the entertainment. Such knowledge therefore needs to be transmitted, and Ibn al-Muqaffa also expresses a concern in the preface that his text should attract patronage and be propagated through the commissioning of further copies. Although many of the stories are concerned with how to employ force or trickery to gain the upper hand or exact vengeance, it is ultimately an ethical wisdom that the reader should gain through pondering their meaning. The core, to use Ibn al-Muqaffa's own metaphor, that is contained within the shell of the narrative. Indeed, the need for an ethical interpretation is stressed as the preface proceeds, aptly enough, to resort to story as the medium to illustrate the themes of a foolish choice that results in a painful lesson that nevertheless leaves the sufferer wiser, or more bluntly, deplorable behavior that leaves the preparator worse off. The latter will culminate in the death sentence carried out on one of the jackal protagonists in the later trial of Dimna, al-Fahsan Amr Dimna, al-Fahs an Amr Dimna, chapter which in Karl Brockman's estimation, by between quotations, by punishing the traitor satisfies the feeling of justice outraged by the immoral teaching of this book. Close the quotation. This may reflect a feeling that retribution is too long delayed, but surely tips the balance too far. There is always a positive precept to the extracted from each story. to be extracted from each story. Yet, however important an element this may be, it is still misleading simply to label the Kalila Wa Dimna a moralizing text, as has often been done. Indeed, another prominent theme highlighted, one complementary but different, is the acquisition of knowledge as a means of attaining more profound understanding. In accordance with the findings of Borzoi's journey to India in search of the recipe for immortality, namely that it is knowledge, in Ibn al-Muqaffa's preface there is a strong emphasis on the importance of knowledge, and specifically that gained through books, including, of course, this book. Such knowledge, though, lies beneath the mere surface of literal understanding and needs to sink into the heart in order to bear fruit. Tamarat. The enlightenment wisdom that such knowledge enables a metaphor that leads into the ethical and religious domains of virtue and God's gifts to man. Repeatedly described in the Quran as God's sustenance to man, tamarats are interpreted as the fruits of knowledge, to be understood ethically as virtue and good works, and sometimes also in Sufi tafsir as insight. Look. In this, if this is a text of the mirrors for princes type, it is one that makes one reflect on human behaviors and motivations more generally, and it is vividly didactic. At the same time, by showing episodes of gullibility on the part of various persons and animals, it is entertaining and, in some respects, even comic. This gives the text a universal appeal, as it presents a spectrum of attitudes and emotions that are part of the life and experience of both individuals and groups. It provides a mirror within which attitudes and emotions can be seen and recognized as one's own. And this is why I suggest the texts, especially when accompanied by paintings, has enjoyed such success and has reached out far beyond a narrow courtly audience, rather than a mirror for princes. Kalila Wa Dimna is a mirror for humanity. These characteristics inhere in the ultimately South Asian oral traditions of animal stories on which the Kalila Wa Dimna draws. This pool of stories, many of them which parallels in the Greek Aesop's fables, are recorded in texts such as the Pali Jataka tales and the Sanskrit Panchatantra. The former contains stories of the previous lives of the Buddha, in which he was reborn in various forms, including those of animals, while the Panchatantra, which is the more direct ancestor of the Kalila Wa Dimna, is a collection of animal tales. The stories they contain are entertaining but also have important spiritual and educational functions. The Jatakas teach key Buddhist concepts and values, while the Panchatantra imparts lessons on the art of statecrafts. Indeed, one of the sources appears to have been an Arthasastra, or technical treatise on governing. The concern with governance is echoed in another source of the Kalila Wa Dimna, the 12th book of the war epic, the Mahabharata, which also includes a section on Arthasastra. However, the Panchatantra is more than a guide to politics and administration. It describes itself in its preamble as a Niti Sastra, a technical treatise on the concept of niti. Think wisely and well in the truest sense of these two terms. But who was the Panchatantra aimed at? According to the introduction, it was devised as a book of instruction for 3 ignorant princes, but as many of the rulers are portrayed as weak and dim-witted in contrast to their wise ministers. If it is possible that it was at the latter group that the text was targeted. More generally, it has been argued that the teachings contained in the Panchatantra apply to everyone and that it holds a mirror up to society just as its successor Kalila Wa Dimna does. Okay, stop here.